Adult sex shop cashiers and employees. What is the one, or more, things you secretly judge people for buying? I used to work at a store that had PRN, just the movies. No accessories, and it was never what the customers were getting that caught my attention, but how they went about it. For example, I had one woman who would come in every Friday wearing a polo featuring the local Catholic school's logo. I made the assumption that she worked there, and every Friday night she would get lesbian PRN and say that she was getting it as a funny gag for a sleepover she was having with her friends. I would have never noticed her if she hadn't said anything. What a great gag gift. Haha guys, let's watch a film. Oops, that's not Finding Nemo, it's Finding Your Clit. Edit. So this is my most upvoted comment ever. People who buy vibrators, then return them later with open boxes. People actually do this. Edit. Of course we didn't accept the returns. I used to earn the bulk of my living from writing erotica and selling it online. It's not that I judge people for it. Exactly. But the best-selling books were always the most ridiculous ones I could write with the least subtle titles. I ended up spinning off a whole new pen name for one particular fetish where the stories would take me literally about 4 hours to produce, beginning to end including the cover, because people would eat it up. Close bracket. It's not so much judgment, because everyone's got their kinks. But there's a bit of eye-rolling when the stories you're really proud of sell about 4 copies but help. My own penis is trying to get me pregnant. A self-seduction mpreg fantasy sells enough copies on its own to pay your rent for the next 2 months. No. That's not a real title. No. That's not a fetish I write. Yes. I'm pretty sure that story would absolutely fly off the shelves. My cousin worked at one and told me a story of a guy who would come in once a week, presumably on payday, and spend time looking at a sex doll that, according to him, is ungodly expensive. Well, after a couple months of this he finally pulled the trigger and bought it. He never came back in again. Friend of mine worked in an adult store. He would normally have nothing to do, so occasionally I would go in to bring him lunch and we'd look at the funny PRN titles. And when a customer came in I'd pretend I was browsing. Once a guy came in inquiring about butt plugs. He wanted to know if they had anything that could meet his size requirements. My friend broadly asked what exactly he meant. The guy replied, "Well, the biggest thing I managed was a fire extinguisher." No judgment of course, but Christ. I worked in an adult store for about 4 years. I know anyone I worked with would judge anyone for what they brought, apart from glass pipes, but that's another story. Saying that, what people would steal was always funny. I had one guy shoplift a huge stainless steel dong and then try to come back into the store with it in his pocket. Another guy stole a vibrator and used it in our changing room. So that was an interesting day. Also, penis pumps got stolen every other day. They don't increase your size, by the way. Former sex shop employee. Once had my 80-year-old neighbor, lovely little lady, come in and buy hardcore gay bondage PRN. Usually Nazi themed. She liked blonde gay men apparently. Currently work in neuroscience. Patient facing. And once every 3 months I have a patient who's an old customer come in. We tend to avoid each other when possible. I used to work at a sex shop. And whilst there, due to my in-depth research and understanding how our products worked, I quickly became their top salesperson. With all that effort, it taught me not to judge, as everyone had their own kinks. What I do judge is when others come into the shop and try to get us to describe how a product is used just for them to get off. I'm not consenting to that. Not me. But my old manager's partner was the owner of a high-end sex shop. A man buying anything insertable without a flared bottom who doesn't take the receipt. It's probably not a gift for his female companion. I don't judge this one, but I do wonder if people buying sounding rods really know what they're getting into. If that's your thing, then go and do your sweet thing, but if it's like a stupid there, which happens, please be careful. The one thing I do slightly judge is people who buy the gross jelly vibrators that are made out of garbage but we have to sell them as novelties. We advise every customer against them if you're actually going to use them inside of your body. We offer decent silicone vibrators for maybe $10 more. You would think that people would spend an extra $10 to avoid infections, but oh no, the sparkly jelly one is just fine because it's pretty and gets the job done. No, it won't, because it's battery powered, which isn't very powerful, and there's no way to clean something that's porous, but sure. Take the sparkly one. Also, Sav vibrators aren't always your cup of tea. Try a Satisfyer, and if you like that, upgrade to a Womanizer. Vibration is great, but air stimulation, suction like clitoral stimulation is another level. Womanizer has an internal with external option as well. Not judgmental, but more of being a bro. I worked for Blockbuster Video back in mid-90s and would always get questions about movies and such. But one question I would hear often would be the hushed question, do you guys have any PRN? Full stop. Me knowing what the competition carried, I would say sorry. Man. Blockbuster is a family-oriented business, and while I could point out a few good movies that have some T&A scenes, it's not what you are looking for. But I tell you what. Go down the street at video store name and tell them, my name from Blockbuster sent you, and they will be glad to help you out. I actually had a few guys come back to tell me they were happy with the selections of the other store, but would come back to Blockbuster for their family movies. Former Essex shop worker here. I also happened to work about a block from my city's area. There was a major LGBT street that shares its name with a place of religious worship and have a few stories. A major one is how what appeared to be the smallest people buying the Great American Challenge. If you see it, it even says on it, not for beginners. A second one is how many times people tried to steal a certain gay PRN star's ass. Trust me, it was pain in the ass just to remove it from the top shelf, given that it must have been a good 10-15 pounds of rubber. Edit. The PRN star is Francois Sagat. Edit 2. Sounding rots. When I was a young teen, a guy I dated very briefly and broke up with randomly called me from juvie to tell me about sounding and his exploration of it, as well as this book I should read, Twilight. I've been through a lot since then, and it's still the most unsettling thing that's ever happened to me. The woman who works at the adult store near me has a really bias. Whenever I go in, she's always bubbly and excited and ready to talk to me about the 38,000 dildos and vibrators they have. Whenever I ask about the male Essex toys, she gets so awkward and drops to this curt professional tone, like I don't know. Do you see it there? I guess we don't have it, or I don't know what that is. It is these. Whatever these are. Anything that a dude puts his dick in makes her internally cringe, and she can't look me in the eye, but a dual-pronged, double penetration vibrating and pulsating DLDO? She's going to tell me all the spots it will hit on my wife in every last detail. Humongous. Rectum destroying butt plugs. I got one for a birthday present as a gag from my mate Steve. Gag was on him when I actually used it. Joy jelly. It tastes like Jolly Ranchers left in a chemical plant. Adjacent. I sell comic books, some of which are adult. Sometimes a guy comes in and he buys yaoi, which is gay PRN, and then quickly tells me it's not for me. I wasn't judging them before, but I am now. High school kids buying whippets. When I was in my mid to late teens, I worked the later shifts of a Saturday evening at a local supermarket. Stay with me, and a guy came in to buy nothing but a cucumber and some Vaseline. Not judging, but I was about 17 at the time, and the event has stuck in my mind ever since. I once purchased condoms at a local convenience store. At that time, I was 17 years old. I put the condoms on the counter and hear a female's voice behind me loudly whisper nice. I turned, and it was my current English teacher. She and I had a nice laugh about it, but inside my head I was screaming. I never told my girlfriend at the time. When I showed up to English class the next day, she winked at me and chuckled. It was mortifying then, but it's funny looking back now. Don't really judge them. I feel like if you actually work at a Essex store, this is the answer. People are into all kinds of, so long as it's legal and consensual. Which you'd assume it would be at a SX store. Then why would anyone who worked at a SX store judge anyone who bought something they stocked? Edible lingerie. Any lingerie is edible if you're horny enough. Bought a blow up doll for Buddy's bachelor party and the cashier said on a very stern and serious voice that this was final sale and no returns are permitted. She must have been through some. I got the impression that everything bad that's ever happened to her flashed before her eyes. Not an employee, but I buy a lot of product. Cashiers. We can tell when you're judging, lol. I think the worst one was that I once bought a bright pink latex mask that looked like a pig's head for my husband. Think puppy player hoods. Just another animal. Big snout and everything. The cashier looked at me for the longest time and then told me she really didn't think anyone would ever actually buy it. I also used to write erotica for a living and I don't judge per se because I'm too weird myself to be doing that. But one guy once asked me to write him a short story about blueberryfication. After asking him for details and covertly trying to figure out what the hell that was, I learned that it's a fetish for, specifically, what happened to Violet after chewing the dinner gum in Willy Wonka. I'll never be able to forget about that one. Oh god, don't ask this cause now if they answer honestly I'll overthink every time I'm at a SX shop. Anything from the used section. There's a used section. I work at a popular chain of stores in Vegas. And my things are penis sounding rots. Like WTF, how is that even pleasurable? I cringe at the thought. The bad but cheap lube. They ask for my recommendations. Then they go for the Taiwan. Dude. You have to use way more of that because it dries out. Just buy the one I recommend and you'll never need a line reapplication during the act ever again. Every time it's anything else than SX robot. I never worked at one. But the SX shop I used to frequent had this SX doll displayed in a cabinet. Scantily clad. Big breasts. Regular thing. Except that it was the size of a 6-year-old. The thing looked adult. Just proportionately scaled back. It was disgusting and I judged the out of anyone who bought it. There is a product called the Great American Challenge or something like that. Was the biggest DLDO we had at the time. Thing was seriously as long as my calf and as thick as my thigh. And was only purchased by dudes that I assume hate their wives. Bold of you to assume it was for their wives. Not an adult store but a news agency that sells PRN magazines. We're not really fazed by people buying them. But sometimes it's weird. 50-plus-year-old men buying barely 18 mags and teenagers buying the unrestricted ones and being very clearly terrified of us. I bought a magazine once. I handed it to the guy at the register and looked at me and quickly looked away when we made eye contact. I sighed and said it's been a lonely week. I had recently broken up. I'm not sure if I got a slow nod of understanding. Or a slow nod of go away you little weirdo. Probably buying the movies. Like I respected the people going in and keeping the business alive, the movie industry, but some guys would come in once a day and buy 3 or 4 videos. I work in a shipping warehouse for a large adult toy distributor. Amongst the products sold are life-sized SX dolls that cost $3,000, $5,000. We had 4 of them sitting in the warehouse for several weeks. Then one day when I came in recently, there was only 3. I don't know who purchased it. But I definitely judge the anonymous purchaser. Nothing, honestly, I don't make enough money to care. Are tales from adult stores. I currently work at an adult store. We sell SX toys. The only thing I judge people for is when they say they don't want to buy a lube because they use coconut oil. Or they say they don't need toy cleaner because they want to use normal dish soap. I try to explain that coconut oil is not great to be using as lube and that soap breaks down silicone and they don't listen. What can I do though? I guess they like yeast infections? Soap breaks down silicone what? Online they always seem to recommend using a mild soap to clean. I used to work in an adult store and we always provided a little handout about how to clean the toys with every purchase. I didn't judge people for not taking it in general. You can look that up online or you may already know what you're doing. But I totally judged the people who snorted and made I do shower. You know, comment. It was surprisingly commonplace for people to think it was a stab at their personal hygiene. Fine. Keep your fleshlight gross and crusty then. Enjoy the infection. I used to work at a PRN store in Tucson. Never judged a single person. So you judge couples? Worked at one for a while. But the only thing there I recall judging anyone for was using the tanning beds in the back. Firstly, hello skin cancer. And above and beyond that, you. Schoolgirl outfits. I don't work at an average Essex store. We're more targeted at fetishists, so we carry a lot of specialized unique clothing and accessories. So it hurts me to see people come in just for that old tired trope. But hey, if it makes them and or their partner happy, good for them. I think it is a tired old trope for a reason. When most guys hit puberty, all the people they are interested in tend to wear school uniforms a lot. When you develop your sexuality and spend a bunch of time fantasizing about people who are literally right there wearing a school uniform while you are thinking about it, I think it only makes sense you'll always have a slight thing for them. Also, aside from that, they tend to have knee or thigh socks which are always hot. Everybody I know loves long socks.